Good afternoon, everyone. So advocacy has always been central to everything we do at COE. And for the past 16 years, Kimberly Jones has been at the center of planning and carrying out our organization's advocacy efforts. Kimberly joined the organization in 2007 as the Director of Congressional Affairs and was promoted to Vice President of Public Policy in 2014. She assumed the position of Executive Vice President in 2019 and has been selected by the COE Board of Directors as its third president. Her start in this position is merely weeks away, October 1, 2023. Kim received her bachelor's degree from Yale University and her law degree from Georgetown University. She is joined at the head table by COE's current president, Maureen Hoyler, to her right and your left, and by COE's President Emeritus, Dr. Arnold Mitchum. She's also joined by COE's incoming leadership team. To my far left, Aaron Brown, COE's Executive Vice President. To his right, Angelica Villapando, COE's Senior Vice President for Program and Professional Development. And Diane Schust, COE's Vice President for Public Policy. Let's welcome the head table. And at this time, I would like to invite Kimberly Jones to the podium.
Thank you, Joe. If we can get the slides on the screen, we are ready to go. Washington update. Thank you. So first, thank you. And I know that, can you go back one more? I'm sorry. We want to first talk about where we are now, and then talk about where we've been, and then finally talk a little bit about where we are going. For those of you who are not government relations aficionados, I'm going to ask you to indulge me, please, while I nerd out just a little bit. So we began the beginning of this year's fiscal cycle with good news. The Biden administration had requested a $107 million funding increase for TRIO, as well as increases for Gear Up and for the Pell Grant program. We were off to a fantastic start. And then the debt ceiling reemerged. For those who may not recall, the debt ceiling is the federal limit on how much money the government can spend. And much of the spring and parts of the summer were consumed with fights about whether or not we were going to raise the debt limit or we were going to have severe cuts into what we were spending. After fierce negotiation, we emerged with the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023. That legislation did a few things. First, it clarified that we're going to suspend the debt ceiling until January 1, 2025, so after the next presidential election, and it set the spending caps for the next 2 fiscal years. And in our case, for non-defense discretionary funding, it essentially said that everything was going to be level funded. What that means for us is that the only way for TRIO to get an increase was for someone else to get a decrease. Also, because Congress has a habit of not quite getting around to doing all of its work, it also included legislation that said if Congress does not pass all of its legislation for appropriations by December 31st of this year, then an automatic 1% rescission of funds for non-defense discretionary and defense would go into effect, meaning there'd be a $7 billion cut for non-defense discretionary programs and $9 billion for defense. So we are not there just yet, so stick a pin in that. At the beginning of the appropriation cycle, again, we said we knew in order to get an increase, we were going to have to fight, and we don't fight against other people getting increases, but we knew it was going to be a tough field. Then, the most conservative branches of the Republican Party in the House made a determination and forced upon their leadership the mindset that the caps were a ceiling, not a floor. So we don't have to spend that much money. We're going to cut and go way beneath that. And we saw very depressing bills coming out of the House side of the aisle. And with respect to appropriations, you all got an alert from us that said, hey, guess what? TRIO was level funded, and this is good news. Never do we have to celebrate level funding. But when you look at the decimation in the House Labor Appropriations Bill, which includes the Department of Education, you'll see that Title I funding, where your talent search students go to school, and where their brothers and sisters of our other students go to school, that was cut by 80%. Instruction for the students at those schools, 0. Supplemental educational opportunity grants, 0. Federal work study, 0. Child care meets parents in schools, 0. And so for TRIO, as well as GARP and the Pell Grant, to come out with level funding was, in this context, a victory and a testament to our work in preserving a bipartisan coalition to protect us amidst the cuts. Meanwhile, on the Senate side, they took a different tact, and they determined that they would follow the cap set forward in the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and they essentially level funded everything, including TRIO and Gear Up. The only slight increase we saw was for Pell Grants. They said they would increase the maximum award by $250. So what does this mean for us right now, today? Two things. Right now, Congress is wrestling against two deadlines. The first is the end of the federal fiscal year, which is September 30. And there are already rumors and projections that Congress will not be able to meet this deadline, and there will, in fact, be a short government shutdown. Now, the good news for us in TRIO, our funding for the next academic year, the next program year, has already been allocated. Funding for FY23 funds your 23-24 program year. So if the government does shut down, you will still have access to your monies. Now, if you call the department and try to reach somebody, they have been shut down. So that's where you will run into some problems. But Speaker McCarthy of California is going to have a very tenuous journey ahead of him because he does not have the votes in his coalition to get legislation passed. He can only lose 5 members of his caucus because there's such a slim majority, and at least 20 members have already said, I'm not voting to fund the government. They want to use this as an opportunity to extract concessions. We don't know what those are. And some, quite frankly, have said publicly that they don't mind if the government shuts down. So what this means for the Speaker is that he is going to have to work with Hakeem Jeffries, who's the Democratic leader, to get their coalition together to get enough votes to get the government open. This presents another problem for the Speaker, because as you might recall, our TRIO alumna, Cheryl Johnson, at the time the clerk of the House, when they had their 15 votes, one of the concessions he made to secure his speakership was that at any time, a member could call for his title. So he's in a very tricky spot right now. But ultimately, the work of Congress will get done, and somehow they're going to get the government open. But then they have another deadline, that December 31st deadline, to find out whether or not, and it's not, I shouldn't say that. It's not that they don't care if we get cut by $7 billion, but I know certainly they do not want to fund, even the most conservative members do not want to lose $9 billion in funding for defense. And so this cycle will repeat itself later throughout the year. So our duty, our objective at this time is to keep doing what we know how to do. Now, for those of you who've been doing TRIO advocacy for a while, I'm sure you're saying to yourself, Haven't we been here before? And my apologies to anybody born after 1980 who does not know why this is supposed to be funny. But we have been here before. As a matter of fact, we stay here. We live here. We have survived the shrinking government era of the Reagan years, particularly in 1983 when the Senate tried to reduce TRIO by a third. We survived the Bush wars when there was an attempt to turn talent search and upward bound, not once but twice, into extensions of No Child Left Behind. We're still coming through, but we have survived the loss of 50 McNair grants due to a decision to revoke $10 million in funding to move from one TRIO program to another during the Obama administration, as well as the impact of sequester, a 5% across-the-board cut to all programs during the Obama years. And we've weathered threats to McNair and EOC during the Trump administration. And we've done that by doing what we always do. We've leveraged our resources, put our boots on the ground, and stayed in the faces of members of Congress, both here in Washington and back home. And we've not only survived, but we've thrived. But I really want to impress upon everybody that the work does not happen at 1025 Vermont Avenue Northwest. That's the Situation Room. But the real work, some of it happens in DC. It happens at the policy seminar, at the National Student Leadership Congress, but the real work is back home on your campuses, at your institutions, at your state and regional meetings. When you have your members come and visit, meet the students, that's how we get our TRIO champions, when they're face-to-face with those students and figure out what this program means to them and their families. And so now the question goes, where do we go from here? And I must say, as was mentioned, I am coming into office as the next president of COE, and thank you. And I'm very fortunate to say that I have lots of bricks with which to add to the house that Mitch and Maureen built. And so let's talk a little bit about a few of the things that we have on the agenda. First and foremost, of course, is government relations. That is our reason for being. That is why organized TRIO exists. And so, of course, increasing our funding, which is going to be a challenge certainly in the next few years. Congress, regardless of who's in charge, does not seem to be in the business of doling out dollars these days. And so certainly continuing our hardcore press to increase our funding. Also, Congress is not in a hurry to reauthorize the Higher Education Act. So looking for ways to advance legislative objectives that meet the needs of your programs as they exist today. And also continuing to strengthen our relationship with the U.S. Department of Education. Myself, Angelica, Maureen have met regularly with Gaby Watts and other leaders within the department, and we've seen fruit beginning to emerge from those regular, consistent conversations. Thank you. And because we know the wheels of progress do turn slowly here in Washington, we're also beginning to explore other avenues for change, ways to meet our objectives of making sure that low-income, first-generation students have an opportunity to excel and succeed in college. And so that's where our state initiatives come in. At the beginning of last year, we piloted a program. We're now working with about 10 states, and the objective there is to really see where the action is. Things tend to move much quickly at a state level, and we're trying to see where do we have friends, what states are actually taking action in this direction. And let me shout out, where is LASAP? Louisiana? LASAP took it upon themselves to host a gubernatorial debate on education that they have coming up in just a couple of weeks. And it's no small thing that one of the candidates for governor happens to be a TRIO alum. Additionally, I'm really hoping to extend and amplify our student programming. we are in the very elementary stages of beginning to put together a college-based undergraduate National Student Leadership Congress to get our college students here to DC, the same way we bring our high school kids here, and also a new initiative, relatively new, our Career Opportunities Initiative. Our first cohort is just wrapping up. They've been in about 6 months of fairly intense guided training with mentors, paid mentors, where they work on everything from resume writing to interviewing skills to career exploration, and we're fitting to prime them to be able to compete successfully for jobs and internships in industry and government, etc. Also, building on the foundation, particularly set by Dr. Mitchum, to strengthen our National TRIO Alumni Association. We consistently get feedback from alumni. They want to know how they can support, how they can help the TRIO students of today. And so beginning to create opportunities for TRIO alumni to serve as mentors, as well as building out our own TRIO professional development program for TRIO alumni. In terms of community engagement, we are a membership organization. And we want to make sure that you all are getting the full value for your membership. You know, we call you all the time for fair share, but we want to make sure you're really leveraging all of that and even seeing what more we can do to make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck. And additionally, we've already begun providing support to help you on the ground as far as advancing the academic pursuits of your students through our STEAM clubs, through our book club, and we're hoping to add to that through additional curriculum for students. And lastly, communications and branding. How long does it take you to explain to somebody what your program is and then how that relates to TRIO and how that relates to COE? We really want to get a fine point on how we explain who we are and strengthen our brand identity amongst our peers in higher education, amongst our alumni, and also the ability to enhance your visibility on your campuses so you will be recognized as the experts in first-generation low-income access and success. And then further, no, that's, yes. You know, we've been talking today, or this week, a lot about the fact that COE is 42 years. I'm already at 50. I'm thinking about when we turn 50 and how are we working now to catalog our history, to make sure we're learning the lessons, absorbing the lessons of those who built this house, and so preparing for COE's 50th anniversary. So that's all I got for you for now, but I'm so happy to entertain any questions.
We have standing microphones in the audience, and if you would have a question for Kimberly Jones, please come up to the microphone and ask away.
I asked this morning, but I'm just going to ask again. So there's a lot of institutions that are out here that are dealing with state legislation that deals with the banning of DE&I offices and initiatives. And so something like advocacy at this point may potentially put a target on TRIO programs or maybe staff that are worrying about their jobs, or, you know, how do I engage in the conversation without putting our programs or ourselves in jeopardy? And it's not every state, but we see a growing emerging pattern. I'm sure it's gonna amplify in the next couple of months. So what kind of advice and guidance could you give us looking at this new landscape of like weaponized D&I combat?
No, that's a great question. Thanks, Ray. First, just to be clear, the recent Supreme Court decision was about one question, whether or not race can be used in college admissions. That is the only question it answered. However, we know a couple things. We know that other challenges are coming, both at the state and the federal level. I think just yesterday I read that a group that's affiliated with the organization that brought the charges against Harvard and University of North Carolina have now brought suit against some corporate law firms about their diversity scholarships. So the threats are coming, and in many cases they're here. So one thing we have to be really clear about, TRIO is a class-based program. and we have to be very nuanced in how we talk about it. Even in McNair, all of your students could be in that first-gen low-income criteria. So we have to be really mindful of how we're discussing the work we do so that we don't get caught up in the tide. But eventually, one of the things we are going to have to prime ourselves for is the fact that they will come after low-income first-gen as well. Myself and several members of the panel here will be participating in a listening session, I think it's tomorrow at 2:15, entitled How Attacks on DEI Affect Your Students and Programs. We invite you to come to that so we can hear more about what's going on the ground, and that will help us prime ourselves for the attack. Thanks, Ray. Anyone else?
Hello. I have a question in terms of TRIO alumni, and a lot of our alumni are moving up in terms of government and positions in government. So New York in particular, we have council members, assembly members. So my question is, how can we, put together the strength of what we have? Because not only are they educated on TRIO, they are TRIO, right? And they're educating the people around them. So is there a movement in COE? Well, I know there is, but can you just expand a little bit about the movement that you're working on in terms of our alumni that are in government positions and how we could use that to our benefit?
That's a fantastic question. Thanks, Michelle. We definitely have alumni in office. As a matter of fact, at the COE headquarters, we have a wall, TRIO alumni in office. And those are just the people that we know of. One of which is Chantel Jackson, representing Brooklyn. Or is it the Bronx? I'm sorry, the Bronx. Sorry, it's the Bronx. But we've actually worked very closely with her and another alumnus, the former student of Paul Beasley's, Marvin Pendarvis, out of South Carolina. They came in for our May board meeting, and we're actually working together with them to do a presentation at the National Black State Caucus of State Legislators later this year, because they have assured us that they are not unique, and we're on a hunting mission to find our alumni, and we need your help to do it. But being vocal and using things that we're already doing, like National TRIO Day, like First Generation Celebration Day, because I think it was Maine. In Maine, they have a state senator who found out that you were having your meeting in her district, and she contacted you all and said, oh, well, I was in Upper Bound back in 1960 what? So being visible, having that level of visibility, and sharing that information so that we can leverage those relationships and help you work those relationships.
Madam Incoming President, the online chat is buzzing about everything that you've said. So they are ready to fight with you. They want to know, when will Policy Seminar be open for registration?
Oh, I love it. Yes. Double like that question. We typically aim to have policy registration open in early November. A SWASAP is always the goal. We want to make sure we're open by the time we get to SWASAP. So that, be on the lookout for that. If there's nothing else, I'm happy to take my seat. Oh wait, I think.
So this is an easy one, Kim. What can the TRIO community do to support you in your first year to make sure you're successful?
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that question. I guess I would ask for your grace as I move into this role. I've got a tremendously set of large shoes to attempt to fill. And so, but I have to discover my own path. I'm not Mitch, I'm not Maureen, I'm Kimberly Jones. So I do ask for your grace, but also I want your, feedback's not the right word, but I always say to people, you are the experts, you are the boots on the ground. And so our mission is not to effectuate what we think is important, but to hear what's happening with you, with your students, with your programs. I can't promise, COE, I know you think we have so much power and so much authority. There's only so much we can do, but if we don't know about it, there's nothing we can do about it. And so certainly keeping us apprised of what the needs are, because I'm an open book. I want to hear, I want to know. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And asking questions like that, that's great. Thank you, Sari. Thank you all so much.